This is the Literacy Mindset Podcast, where education leaders discuss identifying and removing phonological barriers with Mindplay's CEO, Jeff Pendleton.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Literacy Mindset. Excited for another episode today with my guest, Dr. Taneka Tate from Fort Smith Public Schools in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Well, we're excited to have you. Let's see, Assistant Director of Special Education, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro about you and where you and how you got to the seat you're in today?
Sure. Well, I'm a Fort Smith native. So I was born and raised here. I went through the Fort Smith Public Schools system. I did Howard Elementary, Go Tigers, and then I was a Darby Ranger. And then lastly, I was a Northside Grizzly. Okay. And so I just went through our system. And then I went to the military for the next 10 years. I served as a dental assistant while I was in the United States Navy.
Okay.
And so then after the Navy, I was just asking myself, how do I make a difference? What do I do? I had two small kids at the time. How can I make a difference? And so education just continued to weigh heavily. So I went back to school and obtained that bachelor's degree. And so I started teaching second and third grade. So I did that for a few years, and then I became a math coach. And so I did that for the next 5 years. And then I became an assistant principal, a principal. And then for the last 3 years, I've sat in the seat of the assistant director for our school district.
Okay, excellent. And can you give us just a little bit of context on Fort Smith as a school system, size, demographics, a couple of things like that?
Sure. Well, Fort Smith is in the River Valley. We have about 14,000 students in our district. About 2,100 of those students are IEP entitled. Okay. And so, I think we're the either second or third largest school district in the state of Arkansas. And so we're just doing our thing down here in the River Valley.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Well, we're going to dive in and talk about a couple of different things today. In our pre-production conversation, we talked about geeking out on curriculum. So that's exciting for me. I love getting to this curriculum geeking out side of the world. But You started out as an elementary school teacher, got really interested in the curriculum side of things, went down a math coach piece, but also feel like you spend a lot of time in the literacy. So let's start there. Maybe you give us some sense of why is it that reading or learning to read is so difficult? Let's start at the very beginning.
Absolutely. One of the things we had kind of talked about in pre-production that I hang my hat on and that I do a lot of professional development around is really that Scarborough's reading rope. And the reason that I think it's so, for one, it's research-based, it's evidence-based. It helps us to better understand what children at each of our configurations should be learning. Right. And it gives us a point of emphasis. We always have our standards. I think that sometimes standards are a little bit difficult for teachers to unpack. I just think that with that visual though, and then providing instruction, professional development, instructional strategies, along with just co-laboring, collaboration around that Scarborough's rope really does help teachers to be able to flesh out, to define, to create activities that meet the needs of students. I think reading is just so difficult because we don't do it. We don't spend a lot of time and a lot of our educators don't understand. Because in our programs, I did have the opportunity to sit on our university panel for the last 3 years, and that's one of the things that I've really encouraged them to do is for there to be a focus on it. I can't do math without reading. I can't do science without reading. Right. I can't do social studies without reading. So really, reading really is that foundational skill that we need to be able to do all the other content.
Right, and I feel like, since you've done the math side with an emphasis as well, but it seems natural to people to think like you got to teach students math, right? Here is how you do math. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, and obviously in the wave of science of reading and structured versus balanced literacy debates that were there, it felt like for a while there was maybe we don't have to teach reading directly, but really the science is pretty clear on the direct instruction required for reading, correct?
Yeah, there's some implicit and explicit things that organically happen as a result of understanding the science of reading, how the brain works, and then understanding the memorization piece versus creating the structural piece of understanding decoding and encoding. There is just a lot. There is a specific research, a specific way in which for us to gain those skills, and it doesn't come implicitly. They have to be explicitly taught. It's kind of just like, teaching our children to, children don't learn how to walk just because they see other people walk, right? That's one of the ways that they
Sure.
learn, but there are a lot of other things that come into that. There's making sure that their muscles are good, and then making sure that we're practicing and working out the things with them that they need to. And I have a granddaughter that's about 3, so I remember she used to have to do that terrible tummy thing where they were increasing her little muscles to be able
Right.
to prepare her to crawl and walk. So there are a lot of prerequisite things that have to happen with reading. It does organically happen, but only when you have the right environment of the
Mm.
particular strategies and interventions that you need in order for children to learn to read based on the research.
Got it. Okay. And so from your perspective, coming from the special ed department here, and then you have a curriculum department that obviously you work with, how do you team up with them? How do you make it so that you can create the right environment between both spaces?
That's one of the things that I'm the most proud of during my 3-year time is that the curriculum director was a previous special education director, so she
Okay.
too understands special education. But the thing that I absolutely love is that we get to come together to co-labor around the professional development, around the outcomes for students. And like right now, a really big thing in Arkansas is looking at our performance descriptors for learning, and going through all of the quartiles and seeing, okay, what is a student expected at level 1 to do? How can we create activities for that? Because again, they ultimately have to get to a level 4, but when you're thinking through the process of the 1, the 2, the 3, that's where our students come in, because many of our students have those deficit skills. So they may be at the level 1 or the level 2. That helps us to better create IEP goals. It helps our interventionists to become stronger. It helps our teachers to become stronger, because now we are creating those task analysis for each of our standards. So we're beginning with the end in mind. What exactly does a teacher need to be able to teach, or does a student have to have in order to be able to understand this standard toward mastery? And we get to do all of that as a team. And so that is one of the things that I absolutely love about that has surfaced over the last 3 years of getting to work with our curriculum department. Definitely, it makes our IEP goals stronger. And for them, it makes it stronger in terms of thinking through individualizing instruction, or thinking about groups of students and getting to a place where we're kid by kid and skill by skill, and not just generalizing the standards that we have in our district.
Okay, we're gonna unpack some stuff here, and hope we don't go too geeky or too simplistic. We'll see how it goes, right?
Okay, okay.
So you reference standards, right? Which is oftentimes how a lot of things get talked about today, right? It is grade level standards. Curriculum departments talk about standards. But then you also emphasize skills and skill development inside, which is a very, very common way to think about it through the lens of special education. Like, what are the discrete skills we're missing? So what's the difference between a skill and a standard, and how do we think about their relationship? Maybe just, can you talk us through some of that?
Yeah. So I let me just say this: special education is not my first language, right? As a matter of
That's
fact,
right.
it's third. And so I call it Spedulese, right? And people always laugh at me because it really has helped that I understand the curriculum portion of it, because it helps me to have a better understanding on then how to create IEP goals for students. Because really, special education is a service. It's not a place. It's a service. So if we have teachers that understand the difference between those standards that are created toward mastery that is expected for students in the state of Arkansas to learn, then what really begins to happen is, how do we break those down into skills so that we get to mastery of that standard? So what skills does a child have to be able to do this? We just did some of this work back in February. And so we had a first grade standard that had to do with a student been able to add within 20. And so then we did what we call a task analysis on that standard. So what are all the different skills that a child would have to be able to master adding within 20? And so then that gives the teacher an opportunity to create a pre-assessment for that student or those groups of students to be able to see, okay, do they recognize their numbers 0 to 20? That's the first place that we have to start with. And then the next part of the skill would be, is there an opportunity, or do they understand objects to numbers? So if I have 6 of something, do they really know, do they get a visual in their head for what 6 looks like if we're doing mental math, or can they create one on paper if we're doing it as solving a problem? And so just working through, if we're talking about it in terms of math, that was an example of the work that we did in February of really breaking down the difference between ultimately what the standard is. And then some people are calling those learning targets. So what are the learning targets within there that they have to understand? I just refer to them as skills because these are the things that kids will need to be able to do.
Right. So usually a standard is made up of a subset of multiple skills. Many skills that you might be required to meet that standard. Got it. And how do you leverage, or I guess, what does the state of assessment look like today for you to be able to uniformly understand how well the skills are able to be accomplished? Is it a lot of burden on the teacher, a lot of one-on-one, or there are good tools out there that kind of help with that? Is it chaos and everybody's trying to figure it out a little bit?
Well, it's a good mess. Okay. That's how I like to refer to it. It's messy, because the other thing that we have to consider, Mr. Jeff, is that teachers come to us with different experiences too. Right. And so their level of understanding, depending upon the grade level that they're being asked to teach in, it may be high in some areas, maybe low in some other areas, but that's where the power of collaboration comes in. That's where, that we are ensuring that we're fostering that learning, but it has to be the educator learning just as much as the students. So we can't forget that our teachers should be being learners. And so during that team time, during that grade level meeting, whatever the term is that you're using, that's where teachers are really looking at this to be able to say, this is what I understand really well. This is what I don't understand well. And then having that person there to be able to facilitate the learning for that set or group of teachers, I think is really where the good mess begins. Okay. And then it's about perfecting it after that. Because once you have it originally, once you've created your pre-assessment, once you've created your first set of activities to work toward mastery, and then we're informally assessing along the way, and then we get to the place where we are assessing again to be able to say, okay, where are we really? And then we're adapting, we're modifying, we're being flexible about our activities and our learning on a daily basis. That's the good mess.
That is a good mess. Is that feels like it can be a large lift at scale, right? To make sure that happens uniformly across the district.
Well, absolutely. And that's where I feel like that your collective commitments have to come in. Just that this is the work that we're committed to. And then as the leader, you have to be able to have or find the grace and space to be able to do those things. Like, we can't expect teachers to be doing that at 7:30 at night, at home. Right. So we really do have to be able to find the space. And the reason that I say grace is because, again, people are at different levels. And so giving them the grace to be able to learn, creating that disequilibrium in a safe space, them being safe enough, trusting enough to say, Ooh, I never have taught that like that. I botched that up. What does that look like again? Just going through and understanding. And when we do that kid by kid and skill by skill, and we align those, it is a heavy lift. It does take a considerable amount of time. But when we do that, that's where we get those student outcomes that we all are really wanting, because it is about growth. It's about growth.
Do you find yourself having to work just as hard to make sure that there's a space for teachers to be able to make mistakes as there are for students? Like, there is growth in the mistake making, right? That's where we learn. But as an adult, sometimes you're like, I can't make a mistake. It's my job. Whereas maybe it's an easier environment that you can create for kids. How do you create an environment for both?
Well, I think, again, the good part about that for me in this position is that I have to be a learner, because Spedulese is not my first language.
Right.
And so I get to model what that looks like. I get to model in a meeting, looking up a regulation because I don't know it by heart.
Right.
And so, and I'll say it out loud. I'm not sure, but let's look that up. And let's look that up together. So that's how I begin to create the space. And sometimes I get to do that individually. Other times I get to do that in group, small group. And then other times I get to do that in whole group. But I think that it's all about the leader understanding that the culture has to be so that it's not an I got you, but it's an I got you. As in, I am really there with you to walk through this journey, and we're both trying to figure out this good mess for the sake of kids.
Yeah, I got your back is
Yes.
where you're. I like it. That's the I got you. Okay. We've talked a little bit about some of the challenges. Maybe talk us through the intervention framework that you guys use and how you think about intervention along the way.
Yeah, so we do have we have a couple different models that we use. I was at a middle school last week, and we were talking through what RTI would look like, and so we were talking about, you can never RTI your way out of tier 1. So
Right.
you have to make sure that at that tier 1 level that the teachers have the best understanding and the best activities the first time we teach it. And so, of course, that's our RTI tier 1 piece. And
Right.
then moving through the tier 2 piece, based on your guaranteed viable curriculum, what we're doing is giving children another opportunity to be able to learn those skills that we say, you can't leave 6th grade without those. You can't go to 7th grade without those. And doing it and teaching it in a different way. Well, obviously, the teacher taught it the best way she could the first time. So it's going to take an instructional facilitator. It's going to take some research. It's going to take an assistant special education director coming in to say, oh, the first time we taught that, we used these 6 activities. What did we not try, or what angle have we not yet? So again, it's us coming together and co-laboring around what that tier 2 intervention would look like for the next 2 to 4 weeks, depending upon whatever the standard is. And then finally, it's our tier 3 team that's coming in. And I call it core, more, and more. Or if you're a little bit old school, you're calling it double dipping. That's what we used to call it when I first started teaching. So we're double dipping with those students at the tier 2 and tier 3 level, because again, it's about the prerequisite skills. So because we understand what the prerequisites are, whether it's literacy or math, that's where we're focusing on, depending upon where the child lies within the RTI pyramid for that particular standard. And if you have to do that for every standard. And again, that's the hard work, that's the hard lift, that's the, not another meeting. But it's the necessary work so that everybody is on the same page so that we can increase student outcomes.
Yeah. And it is a lot of hard work to be able to do that. But I like that. I like hearing that effort. Okay. What you mentioned, this teacher maybe gave it her best effort and it wasn't picked up. On average, what are the number of ways that any one teacher knows how to teach a discrete skill? I like the way you frame that, because that's an interesting way. It may be easily learned with a different way of teaching it, but any given teacher only has so many ways that they know how to teach it.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think that's really important is that Marzano has identified some instructional strategies, right? And so I think that in understanding that universally there are some instructional strategies that every teacher should have access to.
Right.
And how do they get that? They get that through professional development, they get that through co-laboring, and they get that through being able to watch other people do it. I think that that's a really big piece in education that sometimes we don't make time for. I need to be able to watch other people teach.
Right.
Um, as a way to help me reflect. And especially if I've been doing it for a little while, I I might really need that piece. But I think that those are really important. The other thing that I think is really important is when I was a school principal, what we used to do when we before we went into a unit of study is that I brought in either my literacy expert or my math expert, and that was they spent a half day around that unit talking about the instructional strategies and the activities that the students would be doing, but getting to get students to mastery. And so we focused on the rigor. So that's one of the ways that I think that is extremely important. That again, it takes time, but we had it set up in such a way that we did it once a 9 weeks. The first half of the day we spent talking about the previous unit, looking at the
Right.
data, reassigning students to tier 2, tier 3, depending upon what they needed within the pyramid. And then we spent the other half of the day on the new unit and bringing in that expert so that we could look at that standard of those learning targets of those skills to be able to see from beginning to end what centers do we need to create, what stations, if they're older, do we need to create so that students have access to every piece of this standard so that they can work toward mastery.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to try and drill into that a little bit, make sure I can visualize what the school day looks like. So we're in middle school,
Mhm.
right? And we have some students that might be struggling in particular reading skills, and they might be 3, 4 grade levels behind, right? So let's call it a sixth grader, third grade performance, maybe on assessment. How do you, for one, the sixth grade teacher is probably less aware of some of the strategies to help with the foundational skills that are required, right?
No, sure.
Um, so how do you restructure the day on that? Is there a certain allotted time that can happen? How does that look?
So in my dream school, or the school that I principaled at,
Okay.
because it was a reality,
Okay.
the way that we took care of that during whole group time was that there was an article, everybody was reading it.
Okay.
And so what we did is we took that article, we took that passage, and during that time, those kiddos were circling those words that they didn't understand.
Right.
And so that was the first piece or the first part of it. And so then what we did is we used that time to teach vocabulary. Because if you start to look at the top of the rope, that is an essential piece to comprehension. Because if they're sixth grade, we're starting to look at the top of that rope. So there's
Right.
that vocabulary component that has to be in place there. And so then from there, what we're doing is we're providing or giving access. So I might have a 2 minute video on osmosis because they don't know what that is. So we're bringing in other technology pieces, other things that can help children to be able to connect. So now I'm going back to the bottom of the rope. So basically, I'm working that rope up and down to get students toward mastery. And that's why I started this whole thing with saying that it is extremely important that teachers understand the science of reading to be
Right.
able to teach reading at grade level. Because if I don't teach it at the sixth grade level when the student is in sixth grade, when do they ever get the sixth grade experience? Now, that's not to say that they don't need some tier 2 work and even some tier 3 work. And
Right.
again, that's that core more and more. But during that middle class time that you're speaking to, we're all doing that for at least 20 to 25 minutes of that 47-minute block. We're working together through that passage. So it's
Got it.
not a matter of restructuring the day. It really is a matter of looking at looking at our mindset and our having a better understanding of the rope.
Okay. Beautiful. Does technology play a role in the way you think about that? Does it influence your decisions curricularly, or how do you guys think about technology as a whole when it comes to
Technology
intervention?
should definitely be an enhancement. And
Okay.
one of the things we focus on in our district is that SAMR model. So moving our students toward using technology as an enhancement instead of just a replacement for worksheets, but really moving toward, the augmentation of, of technology, and not just again using it to replace in using it as an intervention for practice, but really as a enhancement to whatever lesson that we're doing. And we've spent a significant amount of money. We're 1-to-1 as a school
Okay.
district. And in addition to that, every teacher has a projector. They have either that little bar where it becomes interactive, or they have the actual screen for it to be interactive.
Okay.
And so I think that we do understand the importance of technology, and even the competition of it for our students, on
Right.
a daily basis. So just really using it as a way to enhance the lessons, as opposed to a place for just substituting.
Okay. I love that. Well, this has been an absolute treat of a conversation for me. Uh, we could probably spend all day, but we'll spare everyone, ourselves included, from the all day retreat of geeking
Listen,
out on
Jeff, I have
curriculum.
enjoyed my time with you. I love talking about this. It's my jam, and I
It, it,
geek out on it.
it's awesome, and I love it, and I hope that we can have time again. Maybe let's end with a crystal ball question of sorts. Give us a sense of the next 5 to 10 years. Are there things that are in place today that you're like, they're going to be there and they should be there because that's amazing? Or are there things that you're like, I hope in the future that that's not there anymore and we can move past that? Are there anything like that you can share?
When I think about, I've been doing this for 20 years now. And so one of the things that I often think about is what's consistent. The thing that has been consistent in this 20 years has been the research. So I think that what we have to do is continue to lean on the experts. And guess what? That includes some of us. So even us creating some action research items that we say, ooh, that really worked here at this school, or ooh, that worked at this school, but it really didn't work at that school. But knowing the research and then doing some action research to see, hey, how is that working? And then lastly, definitely tweaking through that that process for action research. I think that that's something that that is here to stay, is action research that we should be using.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you very much. You've heard it here today.
Yay,
Dr.
thank
Tate,
you.
thank you for taking time with me, and hopefully we can chat again soon.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Learn how we help students by identifying and removing phonological barriers at mindplay.com.